daawwattoota keenya akkam jirtanii pirezidaantii mootummaa Eertiraa obbo Isaias Afwerki waliin gaafiif deebii haala biyya keenya haala naannoo keenya irratti godhuudhaaf dhufnee Eertiraa keessatti argamna. Kanaafuu akka nu hordoftan isin gaafataa obbo Isaiasiin haala naannoo Oromiyaa keessa jiru haala Itoophiyaa keessa jiru naannoo kana immoo akka jiru fi waan isaanitti fakkaata akka nu ibsan nu ayyamu isaaniitiif galatoomaa jennaani baga nagaa dhuftan.
We're here in Asmara, Eritrea's capital. We've been here as part of OMN to reach Oromo's neighbors and friends. Today, sitting with President Isaias Afwerki, the President of the State of Eritrea. We're here to talk about the entire the region that we live in, the global aspects, and then in particulars about Oromos and Ethiopia in general. Mr. President, in the name of the Oromia Media Network and its global audience, and also the OMN organization and our crew, we really thank you for taking your time and being with us.
Okay, in our first question, we want to take you a little back. We wanted to open our interview with a past recollection of specifically with aspect of various movement in the country that started decades ago. As you were coming up in the era of challenges to the very history that made up the country's past of the conversation, what is your recollection to other political liberation or democratic forces in Ethiopia? What role did you play outside the Eritrea liberation movement? Why was possible for EPLF to stay focused on its original mission of bringing a true referendum to the people of Eritrea and accomplished it while it was challenging to others to do the same, or including like democratizing Ethiopia? And what was or when was your earliest exposure to the Oromo question of freedom, and how was that developed over decades?
It's a very long story, but we can summarize this long experience for generations and say the liberation struggle in Eritrea, the political movement in Eritrea cannot be seen separated from the regional issues, and we may have been engaged in correcting distortions in history. Before the advent of colonialism, the map of the region, the history of the peoples of the region, their solidarity, their common destiny was there always. There was nothing new. Colonialism may have come and drawn borders of nations, which is very natural for every people to accept, but again, the Horn of Africa in general and the history of the peoples of the Horn was totally distorted by external agendas and external interests. To come to the history of Eritrea, we can say that with the advent of colonialism, Eritrea was one of the nations crafted out by colonial powers, the end of the 19th century. Unfortunately, after the Second World War, we could have gained our independence like every other nation in the continent, but the superpowers who came victorious after the Second World War came and said, well, Eritrea does not serve their strategic interests in the region, and for that matter, the people of this country were deprived of their right to independence and self-determination, and they had to fight for almost half a century to achieve those goals. But we have never seen this distortion as exclusively directed against the people of Eritrea. The distortion was there with the assumption or with the creation of a myth called Ethiopia, which came as a result of external interests who felt that that myth could serve their strategic interests in the region. Other peoples were destined to accept their destiny as a result of the wishes and the choices of colonial and global powers. And the struggle in Eritrea was part of the bigger struggle in the home region. And why the EPLF remained focused was because the reading, it was not unique for the EPLF to read the history of the region within a bigger context. It was, yes, definitely an Eritrean case, an Eritrean exclusive national struggle for liberation, but it was part and parcel of the broader struggle within the region, and particularly the people in Ethiopia who were also destined to accept the options put on the table by external colonial powers. And the solidarity was a natural option for everyone, not only Eritrea, but for the people in Ethiopia to go into solidarity so that the bigger picture changed for good. And finally, the liberation of the whole region as a major achievement was realized after the end of the Cold War. The Cold War ended, and we said, well, now we have in Eritrea, the people in Ethiopia, the people in Somalia, the people in Sudan, the people in the Horn at large have an opportunity to shape their future and their destiny without the intervention of external powers and external agendas. And then we can come and talk about the last 25 years, how it evolved, what we've seen recently in Ethiopia, the region at large. We still believe and we remain focused within the idea that mission has not been accomplished because of distortions. And we have a common destiny. We need to consolidate solidarity so that we achieve our common goals, which is not new. It's nothing new. It's not come as a result of the events and developments of the last 25 years. It's part of a history of more than 4 generations, as we can see it, and we remain focused. And we continue to be committed to the ultimate goal of a neighborhood that will have to enjoy freedom, stability, and prosperity.
What was your first exposure to the Oromo movement? And
I try to avoid this because I'll have to go and recollect many things. I mean, 91 was the culmination of the common goal. Because of our commitment to the people in Ethiopia, we were open to work with any organization in Ethiopia. We had the APRP, we had the Mason, we had the TPLF, we had the Oromo and other organizations, the Ogaden organization. Everybody was there. And we were committed to a solidarity with the Oromo struggle because it's not a matter of numbers. Rulers in Ethiopia have deliberately distorted history and tried to marginalize the people, the Oromo people, all along. And the history even of the Oromo people are distorted by rulers in Ethiopia and their patrons. And yes, one group coming, sometimes at one point in history, people supposedly representing the Amharas. I don't say rulers in Ethiopia, in Addis, in the Amhara region were representative of the Amhara people. The Amharas were also subjugated to control and manipulation by the rulers. But again, there was this impression that, well, the Amharas have ruled Ethiopia and they were considered to be rulers, which is not true. I say that was a distortion. But all along, the marginalization of the Oromos by ruling groups in Ethiopia has been a very sad history in a number of generations. And our understanding of the Oromo struggle was it could make significant achievements in Ethiopia if it's realized as a major contributor to the overall and broader liberation struggle in the region. The Oromo movement went through phase, difficulties and challenges, the problem of organization at one point, organization of leadership at another point. The history of dehumanization had its negative effect on a number of historical development. Geography itself was even a problem for the Oromos to have an outlet and have access to the outside world and to liberation struggles in the region so that they can organize their population to fight for their liberation. Our relationship with the Oromo movement was a very complex in so many ways. I say, well, armed struggle in Oromia could be one of the most difficult things you can imagine, given the geography of Eritrea, the collaborations that should have been there. But again, I think we overcame all obstacles and established direct contact with the people of Oromo. We had to go to Walaga, we had to go to the western part of Oromia, we had to contact people in the east and exchange our experience with them so that they can stand on their 2 feet and join the struggle of removing tyrants in Addis, which I believe was culminated in 1991. But again, the Oromos were challenged with another phenomenon. That phenomenon was Wayane. Wayane's phenomenon, rather than recognize the rights of the Oromos and allow them to participate in a very democratic process, the political process inside Ethiopia, Wayane created an umbrella, it's called the EPRDF, where a substitute organization was created, OPDO. It was not to the liking of the Oromo people, it was not even to the liking of anyone who had a solidarity relationship with the people of the Oromo. And there was a leadership problem again within the Oromo ranks, which failed to realize the threat coming from this TPLF manipulation. In spite of all these challenges and obstacles, we have maintained our position that the Oromo people need to be supported morally, at least. They have their own resource, they don't need any resource from outside. And these recent events are even exemplary on how much they can impact on the political arena inside Ethiopia and outside Ethiopia. I believe the organizational solidarity and coordination with the Oromo movements have always been there. The OLF is there. Everybody in the Oromo land really appreciates the support and solidarity from the Eritrean side. We may not have done our share. We may not have contributed according to our wishes in the Oromo land. But again, I can say it's a very long history with to cite the importance of how much things have changed now. But again, since the Haile Selassie regime in Addis, and then again Mengistu, the global intervention, the flourishing of a number of organizations inside Ethiopia. We have all along been with the Oromo movement because it's not to be seen in isolation of the bigger picture. You cannot have any change within the region if one of the biggest nationalities in the Horn of Africa, I don't say in Africa, is not participating in the change that should have happened even before the coming of the TPLF in power. Now, I can say the 91, 92, in fact the conference held in Addis was an opportunity not only for the Oromos but for the people in Ethiopia to realize that the participation of all Ethiopians in the making of the future of Ethiopia in a new setting could have saved lives, could have saved time, could have been an achievement for not only Ethiopia but the whole region. Unfortunately, 25 years, that opportunity has been compromised because of the machinations of Wayane and its allies. But now, again, we see that the Oromos are taking their rightful place in the regional development. Hopefully, with the advent of a unique and successful movement we have witnessed recently, we can say, in spite of some of the challenge for the organizations emerging in the Oromo land, the Oromos are taking their rightful place in the global, regional and local scenes in Ethiopia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking of the Wayane regime, the Wayane never ruled Ethiopia with consensus. It's always relied on military and security power. One of the most misunderstood aspects of Wayane's military power was that prior to Derg's defeat or even after that, Wayane portrayed to be a major military power. But those who closely followed the pre-91 aspect, Eritrea actually had the greater and superior military force, even when the defeat of Derg that changed that regime came about. Not only this, Wayane actually now brags that even during the Eritreans' battle for freedom, that without Wayane's contribution, Eritrea would not be successfully. They cite specific examples like the Kekokab or the sixth invasion of Derg. They quell that, all that kind of propaganda they do. But the people who followed really think otherwise. What was the reason for the history of the armed struggle to get distorted like this, and alternative fact created by TPLF to hold as a major military power that decided the future of the East African continent? And also, how did TPLF got to where it is right now? And did EPLF made some miscalculation about TPLF's capabilities that made it a monster that it is now?
One of the sad things in Ethiopia is rulers have tried to live in a myth they create, and it's a repetition of history, and the record is there. We're not talking about the liberation struggle in Eritrea, how it evolved. It's a matter of recorded history for us. In fact, the fact that we have every event, it's not an exaggeration if I say every hour, every minute in the last of the 30 years of armed struggle is recorded. And to come and say, well, I was there to liberate Eritrea, I think it's shameful. It's very sad that people could degenerate into that level of deception and create a myth for their own aggrandizement and distort history. It's dishonesty in the first place. It's a manifestation of the sick mentality people have when they try to distort history, aggrandize their achievements, and underestimate and undermine the achievements of others to portray themselves as it's a myth. In fact, if you go and look back into the history of the successive regimes in Ethiopia who have lived on myth all the time, it's sometimes 3,000 years of history, it's sometimes an achievement that was never there, and creating a perception to consolidate through. It's not a matter of military achievement. Talking about exclusive military issues, I'd say Wayane is not even a player in any event. I mean, you can go back and look into the records of events, even at the end of the 80s, early 1991. In fact, it's the most cowardly leaders I have seen in my lifetime are these leaders of the Wayane. And for them to come and brag about their heroic achievements in the struggle of Eritrea is a joke, in my opinion. And why would someone try to aggrandize his role, his history, in something that has never happened? I think we should be invited to discuss this issue, because we don't need new evidences to prove that Wayane was not there at all. I've lived it personally. I know not only events and situations that evolved the 80s, 90s. We started our relationship, say, in the mid-70s. Until the end of the war, where and how things evolved is there for the record. It's shameful to me talk about that. But again, we will have to say, check. We'll have to say, well, behave and never assume that your deception and your lies will change the course of history. That will never happen. It's not only the military. They will come and tell you, well, this is the fastest growing economy ever, double-digit growth. Now, look, imagine, what are you talking about? It's a pretension when it comes to fighting terrorism, when actually they're breeding terrorism in the region, in Ethiopia and outside Ethiopia. They would brag about fighting terrorism in the region. They would portray themselves as the most powerful nation ever in the history of this region, the Horn of Africa. I mean, you can go on and on and on and talk about what these people are trying to tell generations, and I say it's typical of their nature. It's very typical of their weakness. It's typical of the way they try to impose their agenda upon others. It's based on fiction. It's based on myth. And I don't think people would take that seriously. And people need not be, led to any controversy, because no one has any right and no one can distort history of the last 50 or 30 years. It's always there. Now we can talk about the nature, the political nature of the Wayane. Why so? I mean, 1991, when they dismantled all Oromo armed groups, was it because they were strong, because they felt they were strong? They were threatened. They have always this side of a small group, a small nation, a minority of minorities, and dehumanized because of the successive history of rulers in Ethiopia, trying to impose itself or portray itself as a powerful, the most advanced in every area. And this is a very little mind, I say. The weaker and the smaller would always try to believe that they are big, they are strong. And that's how the last 25 years have been shaped in the minds of the Wayana, and I believe the Somalis know, the Tigrayans know above anything else, the Amharas know, the Oromos above everything else know the size and might of Wayana, and no one should be intimidated with this posturing of small, insignificant group trying to impose itself in spite of the reality.
Thank you, Mr. President. My next question. Those of us who believe in 1991 or the couple of years followed that, the EPLF has a stronger military and security power in the region at that moment. Therefore, people today criticize and see it as a controversial subject that Eritrea hasn't done enough to impose or force the direction of what Wayane, the liberator, was thinking to do thereafter for this last 25 years. Specifically with the cause of Oromo, there are a lot of Oromos who didn't get over with the negotiation arbitrated by you to bring some kind of reconciliation between the OLF and the TPLF during the heights of their confrontation. There was some military confrontation in the east and all. So at that time, when one of the proposals was to bring about 20,000 Oromo fighters to a military camp and then have the Wayane hold the security aspects of the regime. That ended up to be disarming the OLF's army, followed by the eradication and eviction of all Oromo leaders from there. So, Mr. President, for those of Oromos who think that inadvertently that impacted your arbitrary or negotiation decision created this, what would you say? The other thing, based on that, without looking further, things, many Oromos think they don't have a friend in Asmara because of that past history. How do you, assure Oromos that Eritrea is a friend of the oppressed Oromo? And also, what was the measure that Eritrea would take in the future to bring the Eritreans or Oromo and the Eritreans and overall Ethiopia's relationship from this historical?
It has to be seen within the political context. Yes, because we don't speak and we don't get into these controversies all the time. We like to keep low-key and never try to explain our version of the story. But again, I would like to remind people and go, if they have ever lived those events in 1991, 1992, the political context was what is the roadmap for Ethiopia? And how should this roadmap be designed after the collapse of Mengistu and the Derg? And we had a very clear idea. It's a matter of fact that we felt Ethiopia is entering a new phase. A transition will have to be created. all organizations, big, small, weak, strong, who participated in the downfall of the Derg, have made their contribution. But the question was, what about the future? What the future holds for the people of Ethiopia? And the controversy was create a broader alliance among the groups. The Oromo were a major contributor at that moment. And it was a major threat for the Wayane. Other groups, the APRP, Mason and others were not there at all. The Ogadens may have been there, but they were not even part of the direct political process. They didn't participate in the conference that was organized in 1992. Then the question was, what is the future of the political events in Ethiopia and how should it be shaped? The question was, well, the conference was meant to address the issue of democracy. At least it's a big heading, the democracy in Ethiopia, how? We had a very consistent political position on a transition. After all these generations and distortion in history and the misrepresentation of the peoples of Ethiopia in events that led to marginalization of the majority, will have to go through a transition of about 10 years minimum and maybe more, but it has to create an environment conducive for a political process, a participatory political process in Ethiopia, contrary to the philosophy or even conviction of the TPLF that always felt threatened about the participation of everybody in Ethiopia, the Oromo, the Amharas, even the Tigrayans, the Somalis, everybody else. And a substitute arrangement was created by the TPLF, and that was the EPRDF. You will have an umbrella called the EPRDF, and you will create your puppet organizations representing all sorts of national groups in Ethiopia, and that would be the best way, the best option for the Wayane to manipulate the political movements of different groups in Ethiopia. Above everything else, the Oromo movement was a threat. How could it be possible for the Oromo armed units, which were more than 20,000, who, because of circumstances, their own internal circumstances, I don't want to go into the details now, but it was a mistake of the Oromo leadership in the first place. And it's not a matter of handing arms to the TPLF. That was not one of the options. It was a process that should have allowed the OLF to participate in the transition and design the program for the transition. The political context was more important than the physical military might of each and every group. The mismanagement of that arrangement on both sides, the machinations of Wayane to totally dismantle all armed Oromo groups and eliminate the threat. That was their philosophy. The threat for their survival was the Oromo armed groups, and they'll have to be disarmed. On the other hand, the leadership in the Oromo movement was not in a position to even challenge this reality. And finally, it was trying to find someone to blame, and we were blamed for our contribution. The compromise that was reached was to agree on a political program for transition. The technical arrangement of defense and security could be done separately. The establishment of a government will have to be done within the political arrangement for transition. And finally, the issue of EPRDF or participation of other groups will not be any problem. In fact, the fight was between the Oromo and the TPLF, and because there were no other armed organizations. The Amhara movement was not there, armed. They were splinter groups here and there. The Ogadens did not participate in the first place. The peoples in the south were not even represented. Many groups in the west were not represented. Finally, it became a fight between the Oromo and the TPLF. The TPLF did not represent the people in Tigray, even their aspirations. But the arrangement that should have been there developed to a situation where the machinations of the TPLF succeeded in a manner to dismantle all armed groups of the Oromo. And maybe many within the Oromo leadership also had to surrender to the pressures of the TPLF, and some had to flee Ethiopia and stay outside in diaspora. Until 1994, when the document for the future of Ethiopia was drafted. And that was the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia and the Constitution, which recognized the right of nations to self-determination, including and up to secession. It was fake. The program was fake. The fact that they were successful in dismantling the Oromo armed groups was a temporary achievement for not only the TPLF but for the forces that felt that the Oromo should not be there as a major actor. It's not secret to say that had it been fair representation and participation of the people in Ethiopia, then any federal democratic arrangement could have given the Oromos a bigger say in what should have happened. Unfortunately, it was the EPRDF, it was a federal democratic or so-called federal democratic arrangement, which was not accepted by us. I could brag and say I was the first to see the first draft. I said, this is going to be a disaster. It's a substitute for the transitional arrangement that should have allowed the participation of all groups in Ethiopia above every body else. The Oromos could have been represented there, but again, that was a point of contact between us and the TPLF. The TPLF had to continue with external encouragement, the support from outside to use the Wayane as an anchor to implement external agendas was another advantage. And many of the Oromo leaders had to also surrender, formally or informally, to this imposition. I said that was a big mistake on the part of the leadership of the Oromo to accept that reality. In fact, many of the prominent Oromo leaders who participated in the 1992 arrangement, when all issues were on the table, and finally they had to go into some form of an alliance with the TPLF, knowing that the agenda of the TPLF was totally to eliminate any meaningful participation on the part of the Oromo. Now, of course, many will say we were compromised. It's a matter of interpretation that would justify certain mistakes that were committed at that particular moment. The disarming of about 20,000 and maybe more armed combatants on the Oromo side was a historical mistake committed. We now see the fruits of that mistake. Wayane may have achieved something or temporarily maintained control of the politics in Ethiopia, but I would consider that as a major Wayane mistake in the political arena in Ethiopia. Who is to blame for that is irrelevant, in my opinion. We will never regret anything because our political commitment to the transition was always there, very open. We had a very frank discussion with all members of the gang in the Wayane leadership. And that's been one of our problems. We've been seen as a major threat to the politics of Ethiopia, to the politics of Wayane, or the Ethiopia of Wayane. The price we paid is prevalent. It's open for anyone to see. And our political views, our commitment to the people in Ethiopia, all the peoples, the Oromos, the Somalis, the Tigrayans, the Amharas have been there. We've never changed. We should have remained consistent in that. And we now pay the price, but I would say we've succeeded in making our point. We come back again and say Ethiopia needs to go through a transition. After 25 years now, we still hold the same views. 25 years have been wasted by Wayane. For the Oromos, the Somalis, the Amharas, the Tigrayans, the future definitely would require a vision. And that vision will have to be, or take us back to 1992 and say, there has to be a transition again. How? Everybody will have to be involved. That particular mistake, I can tell you, I lived it, I know the details, I know the meetings that we were holding day and night to address some of the undesirable consequences of that particular event, but Wayane's leadership was adamant to eliminate that presumed threat. It was a threat in the mind of that Sikh group, which made a serious mistake. Definitely, they're paying the price for that and other mistakes they committed the last 25 years. So the Oromos, well, they are free to make their judgment, but history can judge the people of Eritrea and the EPLF on their commitments to the struggle of the Oromo people and other peoples in Ethiopia. We have not been exclusively committed to one particular group. Because of circumstances, many would blame us of creating this monster. I have many Amhara friends who have been saying, well, you've created this monster. I remember one prominent Amhara blaming me for saying, why did you have to bring this monkey to this throne? This throne was supposed to be for lions in his own mind. Okay. Okay. Yeah, you can blame me for that. It doesn't matter. But again, no one in this country, Eritrea or the EPLF, had the intention of imposing the TPLF on in spite of everybody else. Not at all. But interpretations are there. They will say, oh, the EPLF brought this monster into Ethiopia and we are to blame for that. I mean, yeah, you can have your views, you can have your way of interpreting things, but the TPLF has been there, will still be there, has not changed, will never change. Its commitment to the people of Ethiopia will remain unchanged. And we are proud of our history, of our contribution. We have made very modest contributions, but no mistakes we regret.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you mentioned in our first questions, over the last 2 years, the entire Oromia region have been engulfed by the protest that challenged the myth that this regime is formidable, very powerful,